Hi there, and welcome to episode 116 of the ADHD Adults podcast. What? Just
116.
silence. Just silence for a bit. Just a little bit. Just shh. I'm shushing you now, just for a little bit. Thank you. Anyway, I'm James Brown, the man whose first ever alcoholic drink in a pub was a pint of mild. And as always, I'm joined by Dr. Alex Connor, who used to be a mild-mannered reporter, but definitely wasn't a superhero unless his power was being annoying. And of course, Mrs ADHD, who joined the mild high club when she was a trolley dolly. Alex,
What?
hi. It's a shit joke, but I just knew you.
Really shit.
Yeah. Alex, hi.
Easy, Blue. Easy.
What?
Right. There's a little story behind this in that I actually forgot. I actually forgot for about 60 episodes what Alex's hellos were for. I forgot he was trying to annoy me. So I've just been letting him say
Oh, that's what they're for.
Yes,
Yeah,
Actually, I
There's no
think
other
we
reason
went
than
over
that.
this recently because we both
we did
forgot.
we did mention it, but at the very start, the very first episode, when I think he did was up, and
Was
I just
that?
and he realized it annoyed me. He then wrote a hello to really annoy me, and I forgot. Object impermanence, just like not there. Easy
It might
blue
not be
in a
that, to be
Manc
fair. It
accent.
just might be basic cognition.
It
It's
could be.
nothing to do with ADHD.
Can you just explain yourself quickly? Easy blue in a Manc accent.
Yeah, it's it's because people write to me asking me to say things that they think will annoy you the
Amazing.
most. And this was
Amazing.
from Leeds ADHD support group. Hello. They also
Well, it
called
worked.
this a so-called podcast in the letter they wrote asking me to do
Excellent.
jokes, which I absolutely loved. While obviously being a fan of the podcast and knowing it's a big pile of old shit that's my perfect Venn diagram of listener.
I can't draw Venn diagrams, as you know. And Mrs ADHD. Oh, I can see she's looking at other things.
Hiya.
How are you both, Mrs ADHD first?
I'm all right today.
Good. And Alex.
I'm excellent. Thank you, James. Yes. Really delighted with Leeds ADHD support group for that hello, Easy Blue, because I get to do my Manchester accent, which is as shit as my Birmingham one.
Yep.
They are one of the increasing number of people, I think, with podcast Stockholm syndrome, despite Stockholm syndrome being a massive lie. It's anything. And one of those people with Stockholm syndrome that's like, sent us a letter, James.
No, they didn't, and you can't read it out.
That's right. From a Robert from Kidderminster away. It says, I heard the last podcast where James and Sam seem not to grasp the concept of cognitive dissonance. That means doing things you know are bad for you. Well, it might be the same reason that many Eskimos wouldn't understand the English word for snow. It goes on to say, I don't mean because it's nuanced, I mean because they haven't got a strong grasp of the English language at all. I'm really happy with that. Thanks, Robert. It is painful to hear them both speak.
It is
Right.
very nuanced and intelligently written, Dad.
Yeah, it's a good joke.
Ex-Dad.
We've had a real letter. Can I read it out?
Yes, please. I love you, Alex, is what it says in the script.
What?
There's a bit in green, but she's not going to read that, obviously. So if you just carry on now.
So do I.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Yes.
guys. I love you too.
Wow.
I was messing around with the script about 7 minutes ago, so James just reads anything out, and Sam doesn't read it anyway.
Yeah.
There's the letters from Christopher Marsden. It says, I mean, I haven't checked, but I'm allowed to read its literal full name out. It says, when I was in prison no, it doesn't. It says, what I love about the pod is that listening to it feels like the chaos that living with ADHD is like. Yeah. The self-deprecating humor, the frustration, the insane digressions, Sam, the constant loss of the thread, and even the self-abuse, and this picture of a bell, which is the word for ding, I like very much. Between the three of them, never fails to make me smile in recognition. Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you.
Yeah. We don't read out the ones with differing views to that, do we? Very often.
No, we don't. The ones that say this, it's the psychoeducation's good content, but the rest of it's just awful.
Yeah, they don't say that.
No, we're niche, aren't we? Internationally, James. Great question. I've just read my own script. I messed it up. If I check my notes, that's the tissue. Hang on.
Still makes no noise.
No noise, really. We are up by exactly one country to 160 countries. What are the chances?
Wow.
Seriously,
No
it's zero.
chances.
Chances are zero. That isn't. Anyway, this week's country is almost certainly not Slovenia, where the official language is it Slovenian? I think that's, I guess. Anywho, a hearty Podstravlieni in Dursel to one Slovenian hipster who's trying out the new Apple Vision glasses and accidentally hit play on the podcast when a bee flew onto his nose.
Oh, a bee flew up my dad's nose once.
Really?
It did.
And
Yeah.
and now we can speak fluent Slovenian. That doesn't make sense, Sam. You got to think these things through.
Amazing. Just quickly before I describe what the podcast is, I just want to mention that after being contacted on February the 27th by Evie, the lovely Evie from Spotify, saying that
Evie.
from ironically the talent in Rabbit Ears team at Spotify, saying that we'd like you to move, I know, to our platform. We've made that move. Hopefully this means that people are still listening and that the tech guy hasn't completely fucked it up and it's not streaming to other services. But just to let you know, there will be extra content coming up in the future if we can manage to record it. So, as usual, this persistent bout of pubic lice that once caused my mate Wayne to burn his pubes off of a podcast is a tragedy in 3 parts. Which is a thing. Last week was about ADHD and cognitive dissonance, which neither Sam or myself really understood. And this week we're focusing on what is an emerging but important area of research, and that is subthreshold or mild in Rabbit Ears. Alex,
like Sam's got.
Oh yeah, mild, very, very much. Nothing about Mrs ADHD is mild.
No.
As usual, the 3 parts include the Russ Abbott of evidence, Alex the psycho education monkey, telling us all about the topic, our personal reflections on theme, and then some, I don't know.
Spunk
I just
trumping.
don't know. Yeah, we'll just call it spunk trumping. So, Alex, you're mildly annoying. Off you drop.
Okay. As you may already know, there are a number of symptoms for inattentiveness on one side of ADHD and then hyperactivity, impulsivity on the other. You don't have to have them both. There are 9 for each in the book, in the big book, Nonsense. Currently, along with some other criteria about when symptoms start and the impact they have on your life, a person needs to be positive, in inverted commas, for Rabbit Ears, James, for any 5 out of 9. And these need to be severe or they happen a lot, that means. What about if you don't quite have 5 symptoms? Well, one thing is it used to be 6. So if you have 5, you wouldn't have got a diagnosis then and you would now because it is a subjective clinical diagnosis. So that's one thing, it does change. And there is an increasing, if not universal, acceptance, BBC, that ADHD, like other neurodivergent conditions, is a dimensional disorder. And that means inattention on one side and hyperactivity, impulsivity on the other are behavioral traits that, of course, naturally occur on a continuum, like intelligence. And ADHD is one extreme of that continuum. With that in mind, the diagnostic thresholds used to define, and then Rabbit Ears again, apologize, abnormal behavior. So getting to the over the diagnosis line, if you like, they are artificial. They're made up, but they are bloody useful. And that means that they can identify individuals like Sam, who experience, I don't know why Sam, we all have it, who experience significant impairment in their daily functioning due to ADHD. Bullied you 3 times, Sam, have you noticed already?
Yeah, I like it.
You've fucked me here, haven't you? What about ADHD?
You've shot yourself in the foot there, James, haven't you? Because I've just said it.
No.
Right, so why is it 5 then?
Excellent question, Sam. Do you want a badge? Several studies. I can't do that. I can't. It's just as bad. That was Rob Thomas the Tank Engine. Several studies looked at symptom numbers before the criteria were changed and suggested that if you lower the number of symptoms, that might be appropriate in adults. Soon after that, research suggested that reducing the number of symptoms needed for a diagnosis does increase the number of people who could get diagnosed by almost 30%. That's a whopper. But data using those criteria in the DSM-5, which is the big book of nonsense, does that lower the symptomatic threshold for diagnosing ADHD in adults? Yes, in a word. So the previous research had already shown that reducing the symptoms needed to 4 would allow many more women to obtain a diagnosis that probably a psychiatrist would say did have ADHD. Because, remember, the tests weren't designed in girls and women, or for them, not really. So some lovely unintelligible science, lowering the symptom threshold than the one proposed by DSM-4, determined the best balance between sensitivity, which is picking up people who definitely have it and not missing them out, and specificity. So false positives, false negatives. So you don't want to pick up people who don't have ADHD and give them a little bit of speed. They go mad. And so that's the best balance. That's what they said. So using these criteria is the best balance for predicting at least moderate impairment in daily living.
So 4, 5, what's the difference?
It's 1, James. It's 1. You don't do maths, do you, in Dracula school?
Walked into that one.
What it, when I was looking at it this morning, there were so many count Dracula jokes because you can't count. I wanted to do, but when I checked, every single one of them had already been covered by Sesame Street in the 1980s, so it's kind of too done. Currently, the diagnostic criteria requires you to have 5 of those 9 symptoms. But in the real world, a good psychiatrist will work with you to understand the impairments your symptoms cause, rather than just following the tick box process. If you just tick them all off, they're going to go, okay, that's pretty obvious. But if you're in that threshold area, they're going to have a conversation with you. It starts to get interesting, it's science-wise, when you look at research into what is known as subthreshold or mild ADHD. And so subthreshold disorders are conditions with actual and relevant psychiatric symptoms, but they don't meet the full criteria. And it makes sense because it's just a subjective classification. In the case of ADHD, James, before you ask, that might mean being positive for 4 instead of 5 of the 9 symptoms for inattentiveness or hyperactivity, impulsivity. A systematic review or a big study what adds up all the smaller studies into a great big one. I like woodpeckers, it says it. I really like that, James. Reported wide-ranging prevalence of subthreshold ADHD, which could go from 1 to 20% of people. Also identified several areas where if you have subthreshold ADHD, that had a meaningful impact on functioning and not in a good way. Other research has shown that subthreshold, in inverted commas, diagnosis of ADHD is a risk factor for several other psychiatric symptoms, as well as being addicted to smoking as well, and high alcohol consumption. In general, outcomes seem to be worse in subthreshold ADHD than in the general population, but not as bad as full-blown ADHD, which we've never come up with a better term for. So this is the idea of where mild ADHD comes from. It does appear to actually be problematic.
We'll wait.
Yes, I do. I do, Sam. Yeah, it's a really good question.
The new microphone as well that we got, it really does pick up the typing that she does during the episodes.
It does, yeah.
They're good microphones, aren't they?
It doesn't pick up the eyes scanning all the different tabs open well.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
But it picks up the heavy typing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Are you asking, Sam, if mild ADHD is actually a thing in my sort of semi-professional opinion?
That's exactly what I was asking.
It's a really great question. It is a spectrum, but not 1 to 10, isn't it? ADHD, that's the problem. It's possible, and I think strongly possible, that subthreshold ADHD, mild ADHD, could be a milder form of the disorder, or perhaps a mixed group of true ADHD cases and false positives. So some people, yes, some people, no. Do you know the big take-home for this? Sam, are you ready to do some sums with me? If you had 4 for inattentive, right, and 4 for hyperactivity, impulsivity, you would have
11.
James, any idea how many? James? No? 8, James. You'd have 8 criteria and no diagnosis of ADHD.
It's 8.
Compared to someone who had 5 and 0, who would have, James? James, anything? Any idea, James? 5. No, of course you don't. 5. And you have ADHD. So there's for us, that's kind of unfair. And it's another reason not to do that angry American TikTok thing, moaning about the neurotypicals all want us to eat bananas. We're, you know, you look like a dick.
What?
Yeah. No, I think it was. I hate to give you a compliment, so I won't. We'll be back in part 2, where we'll talk about personal reflections on the theme of subthreshold or mild ADHD. Alex, hi.
Aight. What's up? Hello, Governor.
Welcome back to. Oh, sorry, I didn't do 3, 2, 1. Okay.
It's fine. No, it's fine. There was a gap. It's
All
fine.
right.
Carry on.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. I'm sorry. Hang on. Right. 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to episode 116 of the ADHD Adults podcast. This is part 2, where we will talk about our personal reflections on subthreshold ADHD. James.
What?
I got there in the end.
That was
Perfect.
magical.
That's baffling.
Magical.
I mean, it was magical. Obviously, all the stuff before she got it right is going to be included because it was brilliant. Wow. Okay, I think this is massive, Ding. I think this is a really big area.
Ding.
Partly because, in my opinion, I already did one, but yeah, you can double ding if you want.
Okay.
Partly because, and we talked about this in a recent episode, even if you just focus on our poor metacognition, even if you just focus on that one thing, the fact that we're not very good often at thinking about our thoughts and behaviors and what we do. And, you know, as we've said previously, if you fill in the ASRF on a Monday and then fill it in again on a Friday, you might have different answers. And if actually the difference is that you struggle to think about whether or not, you know, you made careless mistakes as a child and do it now, because you use a coping strategy like spell checking or checking the grammar using Grammarly, and therefore you don't feel like you make careless mistakes because you've got a coping mechanism to deal with that. That might be the difference between 4 and 5 symptom areas. And therefore, if that means that you just happen to have a psychiatrist that, you know, very rigidly sticks to the guidelines and doesn't have that more discursive conversation about, well, let's look at how these symptoms might impact you just on that one thing, that one metacognition thing, that could mean that somebody might miss out on getting a diagnosis. Then if you look at the fact that, as we've said, the tests weren't designed in girls and women, and we know that actually the tests, particularly for inattentiveness, are not as good as something, possibly not as good as a test like the Mind Excessively Wandering Scale. The evidence that actually 4 symptoms is better for the specificity and I've forgotten the other one, sensitivity of the test in women and girls. This is something that I think will change in the next DSM, because let's face it, fuck all happens in terms of support for 99% of people who would be seen as subthreshold. I actually know a psychiatrist and spoke to them about this. I'm not going to name them or the organization that they work for, and they had basically agreed that if anybody that they assessed was identified as being subthreshold, that they would offer some support, because they felt that this was definitely a thing that needed support. But for most people, if you go into that assessment and you tick 4 boxes instead of 5, and as Alex said, maybe 4 on both sides, so you've got 8 symptoms and don't get a diagnosis. That's
Rachel Riley's in the room, everyone.
Fuck. I've got memory, not math, Alex. I can remember you said 8. Then that the impact that's going to have on your life is massive. The outcomes for people with subthreshold ADHD are worse than for people without ADHD. They are not as bad as for people with full-blown ADHD, but they're still worse. These people need support. Sam, what about you?
Well, I think surely the most important aspect is whether the person is coping or not. So someone might have all the symptoms, like really severely, but be in a position or an environment where it doesn't have a massive impact on their life and they cope. But then somebody that's subthreshold might be in such a high pressured environment where lots of people are relying on them at home and at work, and it has a major impact on the quality of life and the mental health and their ability to hold down a job and look after family, etc. That it's all relative, surely. So if you're struggling, and you can't cope, I think you should be able to get help and treatment regardless of the number of symptoms. And I completely understand that there's got to be some arbitrary scoring process in order to set a benchmarks, because like you said, it's a spectrum when we've all got different symptoms mixed with traits with other neurological conditions, and the waiting lists are ridiculously long. So there's got to be some way of prioritizing those people that need help. But I just think it makes more sense for the scoring system to be based on how well you're coping and the quality of your life, rather than what specific symptoms you have, especially because we all present so differently, so that those that are struggling get help the quickest. Because like you said, these tests are designed in young white boys. So if you've got a different gender identity or a different race, have a different sexual orientation or a different age group, different sex, different ethnicity, or a person with a disability or an impairment or sometimes, basically, if you're not a young non-disabled straight cisgender white boy, then it might not pick you up anyway, because you might present differently. So you might be present as subthreshold and not be diagnosed. So surely it should be based on what you need. So I probably wouldn't have scored highly before perimenopause, because I had I thought that I coped so well and masked so well that I appeared to be a semi-functional normal human being who was just a bit ditzy and quirky and unpredictable. But it was once I lost my coping mechanisms that I got diagnosed, because I couldn't cope. So I
Although to be fair, those coping mechanisms were heavy drug and alcohol use, so that's usually a sign. We're not recording this, are we, James? This is just a chat outside of the.
Well, thanks for derailing me, and I've completely lost what I'm saying, like completely.
It's because you started talking about identity politics, and I don't understand all these new people we have now.
Oh, hilarious.
No, you didn't.
Oh, you know what really pisses me off? Sam's pretty much, I think, hit the nail on the head with with the position. Yeah, that in a nutshell, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it should just be based on how well you're coping and not what your actual symptoms are, because we all present differently. I think it should be comparing you.
As you completely accurately said, we're not talking about giving those people, strong amphetamines, but you shouldn't need the accommodation. You shouldn't need a diagnosis for accommodations of ADHD. That's the point. Why don't we assume with good grace that I think, I don't know about you, but every accommodation that I ask for ADHD that I don't get, pretty much every one of them, I think, would be a benefit to every human, even those neurotypicals who, have a committee where they plan against us. Everyone would benefit from simple questions on emails, not giving us like garbled verbal instructions. Have you ever met a human that loves garbled verbal instructions? I don't think there is one. So, I mean, planning with good faith that we're all a bit ADHD, ironically, would actually help, as long as you don't tell us we are. I think that's it was really good, Sam. I hated it.
Thanks.
I think I would say I know we're talking about actually having 4 out of 5, actually being subthreshold is also bad. But I would also add that if you identify as subthreshold and didn't get a diagnosis, and people don't, a lot of us look at those 4 and they go, well, my brother did. And he went, oh, no, I don't do any of those things because I physically restrain myself from doing them all the time. That's not the same thing, Jules. You big idiot. With your long face. We're not recording this, are we, James? I would also say, as Sam said, this idea of impairment is time dependent. You go through menopause, all those coping strategies, which are at the expense of your physical well-being. It's a reduction of cognitive freedom to do something else. As soon as you hit that Mary Penimores, those like expensive coping strategies don't work as well. So I think the exact same person with the exact same brain would reach a diagnosis. So we have to be why we can't do the non-pharmaceutical accommodations, which don't fucking cost anything really. I do not know. Gets right on my tits. James, no time for the game?
No, we've got time for the game. I obviously forgot about it, but luckily something happened which you're aware of. Luckily something happened which what is the score? 12-10, 13-10, 13? I've forgotten.
We have no clue.
You're winning anyway. So Yes. So Alex and I were recording some videos yesterday to put on the website to help people understand ADHD, almost like a little course of what's ADHD and medication and stuff. And after you left, so before you got here, Alex, I sent you and Sam a picture and Jack actually saying, I think I've just won ADHD because the SD card, the memory card for the camera.
You didn't send that to me.
Well, I don't like you, obviously. I'm sure. No, I didn't tell you about it. Yeah. Anyway, I'd walked downstairs with the memory card in my mouth, holding it because I had a handful of stuff. I kept it in my mouth because I forgot it was there, and then went to make a bowl of porridge. And I must have spat it out for some reason. And then when I put the porridge in, I went to the camera. Where's the memory card? And I looked it for 25 minutes. I looked everywhere, and then vaguely I thought I was near the air fryer. So lifted up the air fryer, looked underneath. No, now luckily both of the drawers were out. I'd spat it into the air fryer, and it was at the back of the oven bit in the air fryer. And luckily I hadn't turned it on.
Not only, Sam, did he send me a picture of it, but we were together physically in the same room as well.
He's just trying to wind you up there. Anyway. That's not the thing that I got wrong.
No, I assume the question, James, is why did I make porridge when I haven't eaten human food for 273 years?
There was blood in it. Alex, obviously, not milk.
Like the golden child, remember that?
Yeah, I do, yeah. So something went wrong afterwards. I lost the memory card afterwards, believe it or not. So after filming it, which of these three things happened? And I again searched for ages for this when I wanted to edit it. Did I leave the memory card in the camera, put the camera away in the garage, and then spend 25 minutes looking around the front room for the memory card? Did I drop the memory card outside as I was taking stuff into the garage so it was just on the drive outside the house? Or did I already have it plugged into the laptop, but because the adapter was underneath the laptop, I couldn't see it?
Right. It's not 2. It was on the drive because it was the daytime and you can't go out, can you, in the sun? So it can't be 2. I don't think it was in the garage because your garage is full of the steaks left over from you. You can tell by your smug face, I haven't got this. You tell immediately. So look at him, look at his gives him little micro expressions. The advantage of the psychopath is you can spot micro expressions. And that was just a tiny little eye thing of like, keep talking, fat boy. So I'm saying 3. I don't know what it was.
You're wrong. Left it in the camera, didn't realize, and looked for ages like, hang on a minute. And it was still in the camera. So
in the
gloriously, in the garage, gloriously, I dragged one back. I think it's 12-1. It might be 13, 12 and 11. Gloriously, that's a reference to our friend Lee. We'll be back in part 3 for some spunk, trumping, etc. See you in a bit.
Bye.
No.
Trumpet.
Welcome back to episode 116 of the ADHD Adults podcast, for the love of God. This is part 3, where, as always, we give absolutely shite, apart from me, tip topics on the theme, which today is mild-mannered ADHD or sub-threshold ADHD. Right then, anybody got a top tip for us? James?
Hospital pass there from Alex. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it?
I think this is really difficult because we do a good one. We do have a level of agency in this. That means that for many people feel obviously that when you're in the GP's office or when you're being assessed by a psychiatrist, that you kind of have to go with what they say, and often, you are able to challenge these things. So if, for example, you are told that you don't meet the threshold for 5, ask how many symptoms you do meet the threshold for. Have a conversation with the psychiatrist. Or if at the level of the GP, for example, if you take your ASRS in and they say, well, you don't meet the criteria, ask to say, well how many do I meet then, for example? If it is, as we've said, 4 and 4, then knowing about poor metacognition, knowing that you can have a conversation saying, well, I genuinely feel actually that maybe we need to go through this together, or take into account the informant reports from other people that might pick out that you've got more than 4 of these, is helpful. Maybe even make the psychiatrist or GP aware that there possibly is a thing called subthreshold ADHD. There are quite a few scientific studies looking at this, actually. It's not something that's just been made up and thrown about. And also remember, in terms of self-acceptance, that I think Alex has mentioned this in the past, the whole kind of concept of a scientific fact, is false, because
Certainly in your papers it was.
fabricated, in fact. So obviously it used to be 6, and that was based on some studies looking at the number of symptoms, and then further studies suggested it should be brought down to 5. Now, when it was 6, that doesn't mean that it was a fact that you had to have 6 for ADHD to exist in you. Just in the same way that now it is 5, it doesn't mean that it is a scientifically proven fact that you have to have 5. There's a possibility this will change in the future. So even if you do struggle to get help in terms of the self-acceptance or self-identification as somebody that may have ADHD, it's probable at some point in the future that it will turn out to be a dimensional disorder, and there will be, if you like, levels. And some people do get told whether they've got mild, moderate, or severe ADHD. Some psychiatrists do use terminology along those lines. And the last tip is get someone to help you with your forms, because that lack of metacognition, that lack of being able to think, well, hang on a minute, how do I do that? How does it affect me? Can be one of the things that could be the key in terms of the number of symptoms meeting the threshold. Sam, what tips have you got?
I haven't really got any tips, but that's a good point, because you're right. Like in the same day, or even in the same hour, I could probably fill that ASRS form out completely differently, because you're just changing all the time. And I think it's important to say as well that self-diagnosis is valid, and you can still get help through access to work and access coaching, even if you haven't got a diagnosis. If this is having an impact on your life and you're struggling with it, you can still get help with it. And that's all I can think of.
Not bad. It's good.
Alex?
Somebody's honestly changed the batteries on Sam. She's incredibly professional today. I don't like it.
Sorry.
No, it's a really good one. Right. Yeah, top tip. Have you tried a planner? That'd be my advice. No, not really. What I will say is that the imposter syndrome, I think, would be really huge. It's huge if you're fully diagnosed and treated with ADHD and you have all the symptoms, and James would have 9 if he'd filled in the forms properly. You still, I think, do you agree with this? You still think sometimes, oh no, I don't have ADHD really. It was all a mistake. I'm a shit person.
All the time.
And if I don't take my literal amphetamine, which sends me to sleep, I am pretty much unfunctional still.
Yeah.
And yet I think that I'm just a shit person.
Yeah.
And so if you don't quite reach diagnosis, or you didn't answer the questions right, whatever reason you're sub-threshold, either because you are or because it isn't quite right, the diagnosis, you're going to feel even more fraudulent, I imagine. That's going to be a really difficult position to be in. And it's going to be objectively more difficult for you than those neurotypicals in that committee room, all going, let's get them. So what I would say is the first group of things is do the practical stuff we have to do. The buddy system, if you can. Double up on tasks, double bubble, I always call it. So if you want to take a glass from your bedroom down to the kitchen, and you're looking at it and going, why don't I just take that down? Shut the window at the same time you get next to the glass, or do something else next to the glass so you're there anyway. Anything where you can do double tasks gives us double dopamine. It works. Ask for simple instructions at work and with your partner. Say, do you mind giving me one at a time because I'm, special? And really ask yourself those questions we ask, which leads to the most important top tip, which is just don't give a shit. Join us. We do not care. ADHD Towers and Schlot ADHS, as James calls my house, whether you have a diagnosis or not, whether you're sub-threshold or not, we just don't give a shit. Join us. No one cares. No one asks. Identify how the hell you like. Because of all the new people, Sam, that I don't understand. Just you're welcome with us, right? Say again.
And vampires.
Yeah, we're all inclusive.
Let's not. Honestly, in about 30 years, I'll get cancer. Do you know what he said in 2023? He said vampires wasn't a thing. So baffled by it. Everyone's welcome. Identify how the hell you want. That's the most important thing. Everyone, you all count with us. Everyone, however, doesn't matter. It's so important to have a tribe, right? And feel like you fit in, because it's fucking exhausting trying to pretend you're something you're not. That's it, James.
Fab. Well, that was episode 116 of the ADHD Adults podcast, where we talked about ADHD and subthreshold ADHD. That doesn't make sense, does it?
No. Because we didn't, did we, James? We only talked about the second one. Why have you written that?
What? Because of the, why do you think? Because of the thing? Because I just changed it from cognitive dissonance because it was the same as last episode's script. Anyway, if by a miracle you enjoyed this podcast, why not support the charity on the link provided? Because otherwise Alex will have to carry on diminishing himself by annoying pufferfish in the aquaria of Bavaria. I fucking love that. For a few euros a time. If you want to get in touch, contact us on the Discord, i.e. Discord.
Wait, why am I annoying pufferfish? Aren't I pretending to be one?
Because they
Did
go.
Chat GPT write that for you, James?
It didn't actually. No, I wrote it. It's not good. They're not good. It's not a good section.
I did
Thanks for
like
pointing it
Aquaria
out.
of Bavaria. Though.
Exactly. That's the
it's
reason.
Beautiful.
That's
beautiful.
That's pretty much the whole reason that it's in there. Anyway,
I call it Bayern, though, obviously, because you know you should use the home language. Mir san mir boys. Not just boys. Shit.
Trigger warning klaxon, 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 big klaxon. Trigger warning klaxon, 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 klaxon. Trigger warning klaxon, 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 big klaxon. Trigger warning klaxon, 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 klaxon. Trigger warning klaxon, 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 big klaxon, big klaxon. Trigger warning klaxon. Klaxon, 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 klaxon. Trigger warning klaxon, klaxon, klaxon.